This is the Ego Project, and I am Lisa Heidel, and I'm here with
Cristine Seidel.
And we have a very special guest today. We have Dr. Dawn Batson with us, known as Dr. B to many of our students. And we are going to be discussing cultural identity. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction to Dawn and then let her share with us who she is, and we're going to explore cultural identity. So Dr. Batson is a creative professional with 20 plus years of experience in multicultural education and arts administration. When she was at Florida Memorial University, she utilized music and the arts with an emphasis on the steel pan, which is known as a steel drum in the US, as a medium for cross-cultural outreach. Okay, and Dawn, I'm going to let you fill in those gaps there. Tell us more about you.
Well, it's a long story. These gray hairs didn't come yesterday. So I'm originally from Trinidad and Tobago, and the southernmost islands in the Caribbean, Twin Island Republic. And it's a multicultural society and also multi-ethnic society. And growing up in that space really gave me access to things I might not have if I were born somewhere else. And also, I grew up with very, very strong women around me, my mother being one of them, my aunts being others. And my mother she was a musician herself, and she always encouraged me to explore the music, the culture of the islands. She gave me that freedom. And so it's formed a great deal of who I am today.
And when did you move to the US?
Well, early on, when I was about 7, my mother and father came up to the US, and they were thinking, I think, of migrating. But that was around, to give my age, that was around just after Martin Luther King Jr. had been killed. And my mother, being in education, she was really, really, really struck by that. And it was in New York. We were in New York. And she said, she is going back to Trinidad. And at the time she was pregnant. So she wanted my brother to be, who we came up after, to be born in Trinidad and have that support of family, of society. And so then when it was time for my undergraduate work, I came up and I went to Hofstra University in Long Island. And because at the time, Trinidad, the universities in Trinidad, University of the West Indies at that time, didn't offer music education, which was one of the things I wanted to study. And so I went to Hofstra University, which in itself was as a private university, as a majority Jewish university, and coming directly from Trinidad in January in winter, it was another encounter with different selves.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, I went back to Trinidad and worked for quite some time in the school system. And I toured with, because I'm a musician, I toured with different orchestras as musical director. And then I decided, because in our travels, what I found was that in terms of the business, we would be on the poor end contractually. So I really wanted to explore music business. And then I went up to University of Miami and did music business there. And then after my master's, I decided that I wanted to create a new doctorate combining business, international affairs, and music. And that's what I did my doctorate in, really, really using the steel orchestra of Trinidad and Tobago as the focal point.
Wow. Oh, so you've been in a lot of different groupings of people and, very multicultural. So, yeah.
Yes, because after University of Miami, I had an opportunity to start a program with the late Dr. Alfred Princeton and the late Melton Mustafa at Florida Memorial University. And Florida Memorial University is the only historically Black university in South Florida. And there we were starting a program which looked at the oral traditions of jazz, of the steel orchestra, of gospel, and allowing students to really explore those musical genres. And at Florida Memorial, I was then exposed to the African American history, which is quite different in terms of the way the things that African Americans have had to deal with in this country, quite different from what has happened in the Caribbean, even though the initial onset was the same in terms of slavery and other things, colonialism. So that was another, very,
Wow.
very interesting foray. And then now I'm in the Midwest, and that too is another interesting. You find people are so different and people are the same.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you for saying that, because as I was preparing for today, I was thinking about how in the US, so much of our cultural identity is regional.
Mhm, mhm.
It's based on where we're located. Even though you were in Florida, which is southern United States, it's still not the South.
Mhm,
It doesn't have the same
mhm.
flavor of the South. And I lived in Atlanta for 10 years, so I feel like I've got a good sense of the South. And then you were also on the East Coast, and then you were in the Midwest, and I grew up my formative years in the Midwest. So I understand what you mean by the people are the same everywhere, yet so different. The cultures are so different. Yeah.
Yes, that is
Yeah.
so true.
Yeah. Where have you lived, Christine?
Oh goodness. So I originally am from out west. So was born in Southern California and lived in a little town outside of Boulder, which was teeny tiny, population of like 2,000 back when I was there, much bigger now. And then, my dad worked for a corporate company. So we actually transferred quite a bit. So went from Colorado and had a quick little stint in Kentucky, which was a culture shock for me. And then in Kentucky came to the South in Georgia, which even from Kentucky to Georgia was quite a transformation. But really we were the only family, extended family that had left out west. So that was an interesting experience being a Southerner by transplant, but going back out west to family and really kind of being perceived differently at that point. So, culture is an interesting conversation, I think, as we become such a transient type of people, yet how much we still identify culturally to pockets, even though we may, transplant to different places, how long it takes for us to pick up, a new identity after moving somewhere. But I just have to say, Dr. B, like your bio and the way that you tell it, and having music be this centerpiece that is like weaving all of these experiences in different cultures and just a vast experience of immersing yourself. It just felt like you were telling a story and the music was just kind of this centerpiece that connected it all. So that was very soothing to listen to you tell that story. It was very beautiful for sure.
Oh, thank you. And I love the way you describe that.
Mhm.
It really is true. It has been an integral part of life and like an ocean wave.
Mhm.
It's totally
Mhm.
always constant.
Yeah, it was beautiful. I appreciate
It
that.
is. You can almost see the musical notes as like
Mhm.
the thread
Yeah, yeah.
weaving through your life. Oh, that's so. Thank you for sharing that, Christine. That's so beautiful. You're right. So, having lived in so many different places, and I know that you return to Trinidad and Tobago often, right? Back and forth. So, how do you define your cultural identity now?
I think my cultural identity is really, really rooted in the culture of Trinidad and Tobago because even though I've lived in other places, prior to COVID, every year I would be there. So that it kind of is the wellspring, where I went back those waters of eternal youth.
Yes.
Obviously didn't drink enough, but it's that going back there and just refreshing myself each time, so that even though around other influences and learning, because that's the beauty of life to me, in learning about other people and embracing, you know, and trying to understand how people approach life, still I had that strong foundation to which I could always go back, and to which I do go back.
Yeah.
You find that you, when you return, when you return back to the US after being there, do you find yourself recharged?
Always.
Yeah.
Yes, I do. Because, the US is not an easy society in which to live, especially if one is wears a brown body. So it's good to go back to your roots where you're supported regardless of what you might look like on the outside, and be accepted for perhaps how you think, how you interact with people. And that gives you a I keep saying foundation, but that is it. Foundation to come back and bear the bear the strings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Yes.
Slings and arrows of outrageous fortune.
Well, thank you for saying that about, there are different Americas. There are different, based on, like you said, the body that you're in, the body that you were born into. Very different experiences. And, Cristine and I are, Caucasian women, and our experiences have been very different. Yet Christine's experience has been very different than mine. But there is that same nugget of how people interact with us. So the ego work, that the wounding that happens around the ego when you go from a culture that is, like you said, very familiar, that you grew up in, and then coming to a culture that, yeah, it's challenging being in a brown body, in any body that is not white, really. Can you talk a little bit about that wounding that occurred and the work that you've done around that where the ego is concerned?
Let me start again by saying foundation is essential, because, as to repeat, I grew up with a strong mother, strong aunt, strong woman. And I remember in Trinidad, one time I was going through a very difficult period, and my aunt told me, you have to make a decision. You can either give up, or you can work through this. And to me, that gave me that autonomy to say that, yeah, this is my life, really. I make the decisions, and luckily I'm still here, so I made the decision to go forward. And that has been with me all the time. So that when you find you're experiencing death by a thousand cuts, then each time you have to heal that cut. But you have to ensure that the underlying tissue is strong. Yeah. And for me, I am so fortunate that I do have strong tissue. But even that strong tissue can can suffer damage. And so that is when you look at your support system of friends, of family, of if you're into religion, your religion, if you're into whatever it is you are into, spirituality, you need that support, those communities of support, because that helps with the healing of that tissue when you're being beset.
Yeah, and I think that is such a beautiful testimony to, I think, a concept we really haven't touched on in this series, is that, having that strong foundation, that reflective space of coming to it when you feel this wounding, and then reflecting truth to you, to be like, oh yes, I remember, right? Like, I remember who I am again. And then going out, like that, that sense of reflective support systems, family, friends, how important that is, not only in the healing, but in the quick return to who you are, right? Like this, the sooner you can sense that again, the quicker you can show back up as your true self. And so I love that you talked about the strong foundation of women, which is probably part of your cultural identity, is so much from what they were able to speak into you, and that's, I think, something that we can attest to now is reminding people that it's not that the wounding occurred and you are now set off to go heal it yourself, but have that reflective space of support to encourage you and remind you is such a important piece to be reminded of.
Yes. And another part is that in Trinidad and Tobago especially, there's a culture of joy, and you you we have something called picon, where people will tell you all sorts of things. If you're a large body, they might call you skinny. That'll be your nickname. So you start over the years, you develop a thick skin. And I've told my daughter before that you have to be able sometimes to laugh at yourself and to laugh at situations. Because sometimes, as they say, if you don't laugh, you're going to cry.
Correct.
And
Absolutely.
that joy, and the music is part of it.
Mm-hmm.
That
Oh, yeah.
ability to have something, whether you're a writer or you're a psychologist and you're helping people, something that you can point to, be it needlework, crocheting, dancing, just looking out the window at flowers.
Yes.
Something that you have. It can be something really small, but something that brings you back to yourself in addition to community.
I love that. Oh my goodness. And even I can almost even just feel the steel drum, the vibration, not only from it, but like it actually like raising you up. So cool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Is it hard to separate the music? And I know you're an educator. Is it hard? Is that part of your personal identity? How you can, do you consider that more personal identity or cultural, or are they inseparable to you?
Inseparable, because my whole family, I come from a family of musicians, so I was surrounded by music from the time I was born, and so that music has really been a part of me. And I'm also from a family of educators, so they go hand in hand. I can't see where one ends and the other begins.
So good. Well, I've listened to your podcast and read, reviews and feedback and comments, and you are so beloved by your students. And they're also, I actually have one comment from a student said, any of Dr. Batson's students will tell you she is an excellent educator who brings the best out of you. She challenges you, and don't let that smile fool you. She is very disciplined when it comes to the classroom. Okay. She is one of the most respected faculty at FMU, and I am honored to be among those she taught. Our country deserves to honor her for the professional manner in which she was promoted, in which she has promoted our pan culture around the world. And then, of course, she'll always be Dr. B to me. So what is that? I mean, and this isn't just, an anomaly. This is across the board, and people, they're, coming forth to support you in different ways as you're going on, going out now as being a coach and starting your own online forum, and they're supporting your podcast. What do you think that is? Is it a cultural thing, where, you see someone, trying something new and, going to help? Is it musical? Is it you, just your essence? Like, can you talk a little bit? And I know it's hard to talk about the loving aspects coming towards you, but I mean, this is across the board, Dr. B. Can you talk a little bit about that and your ego work around that?
Well, it is difficult to talk about that, but I think it's in terms of approach. I always approach students, the people that I meet, the people with whom I interact, from a position of respect. Okay. I remember years ago when I was dealing with a particular orchestra of 100 men and in a steel orchestra, and one in particular didn't think that I knew anything. You know,
Mhm.
there's sometimes people like that, and some days maybe I don't know anything. But in this case, I did know what I was talking about. But I approached him with respect in that I knew he had a wealth of experience, different experience from mine, but something I could learn from. And I think that that is really important, that you respect the experience that people have. They mightn't have the, say, degrees or the paper or what have you, but they have, each one of us has an experience. And I remember one time I was working at a bazaar, a church bazaar, and I was explaining this thing to these little children, and this little boy who was about 4, he came up and he said, "You know, if you do it this way, it's going to be better." And I said, that is so true, because from his perspective, his head barely reached the top of the table. But from his perspective, he could see that there was a much better way of doing things. And I took what he said and I changed it, and it was much better. He was right. You know, and so had I said, "Oh, you're 4 years old, you don't know anything," I would not have learned. So to me, learning is that respect, that I bring something to the table, but everybody else does as well. And I learn from people. So that's
Where
my
does that
philosophy.
where does that humility come from? Because it is about being humble. It's about being, being able to humble yourself to recognize that I don't know everything. So where does that come from? Is that innate?
I think it's a combination, because my mother, who was a strong, as I said, strong influence on me, was also very talented, but very, very humble. You know, and so seeing that as someone to whom I could look up, then going out of that or away from that would not, it would not make sense. It would not be me, because this is what I was taught, that, and I've found it, the greatest minds and thinkers sometimes have come from the humblest of bodies, the humblest of people. Because if we look at us in this universe in which we live, we're a tiny dot. We're a tiny dot surrounded by galaxies. Who are we? You know? So you start with that humility. We're all made of stardust, but we're just dust.
Yeah.
Mm.
I love that. I love that story about the little boy, because what a way to kind of just speak some identity into him too, right? Like, that what he has to say and the view he sees that he's having has value, and that you had the space to honor that in him. So I think that's really cool. I do have a question, because you've been in and out of so many different cultures, and we do know that the ego is here to kind of protect us, right? Like it doesn't want us to be seen for who we really are and be rejected. Oftentimes when we go into new places, we want to put on this protective layer to us, so we don't feel rejected or abandoned for being our true self. Because you've been into so many different cultures, whether they were, location, in this world, or if they were, male, female, or if it were, spirituality. Did you notice as you went in and out of these cultures that your ego work started kind of becoming easier? Did you see that at the very beginning, maybe you were more protective, and then as you continued, you were more open? Or, did you see any change in how you went in and out of some of these cultures?
I think that's really, really a good question in terms of approach, because I think that initially you always have it. I always have uh, um, a strong protection for myself, that I do not lose that part of myself. But as you become more comfortable with people, those layers of protection sometimes fall off, because you can allow, it's like protecting that that inner point, that's so fragile, you know. But after a while, you say, okay, these people have proven that, yeah, they're not going to try and destroy me, and I can open up and be who I am. But you do have that protection. I'm naturally an introvert, right? And so I need that time, even though in music and so on, I have to be an extrovert. I put on a different persona when I'm in front of my students, when I'm in front of an orchestra. That's a different persona. If you find me in my home, I need that time to recharge. And it's the same with going out and being with different communities. It's exhausting because you have to be careful for yourself and then be careful of others too, because you don't want to detract from who they are either.
Yeah, I think that's great. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, because I think there's the belief of, well, if you're an authentic person, you're the same across the board, right? And there are aspects of us, those true, right, aspects of who we are, our values, our belief systems, our general, personalities that are authentic, that across the board. But we do have, we fill roles in the world, and we have to wear those roles. We do. And I think there's a lot of confusion about that. Like, well, if that's not authentic, if you are outgoing sometimes, well, of course it's authentic. We have to get out in the world, right? We just have to carry those things, that light inside of us, like you said, that's very fragile, that has to go with us everywhere we go.
Yes.
Because it's
And
who we are.
that light, as you said, it has to be recharged. At least for me, there are times I just need one of my friends once said, I look like a totally different person depending on when you meet me. Because if I'm involved in a project and I'm going out and I'm doing, that's one persona. But then the person that has to be charged and is sitting on the chair with a book and just being interior, that's a different person. One looks like, oh my gosh, she's so lazy. The other one looks like, oh my gosh, can she slow down?
Oh, I'm with you.
The duality, right?
Yeah. I'm definitely with you on that one. So let me ask a little bit about integrating different cultures into your identity, and pulling from, you've been in the US in different regions, different places. I know that you're well traveled, around the world. So what is your belief system about integrating different cultural identities into who you are?
I think that the world is a wonderful place. And one of the pieces that I wrote some time ago when I was involved in an artist collective where we had artists of different types, I wrote a piece called The Binding of Isaac. And we studied biblical texts, and in the group we had atheists, we had Jewish, we had Christian, we had everything. And each person created something. But in that piece, it was the violin, the pan, the shofar, the drums. And so all those different elements came in because when you're around people and you're learning from people, it becomes part of you as well. So that to me is the beauty of life and the beauty of learning, because you do incorporate those parts that you find, oh yeah, this is cool. That can become part of you.
I love that. Yeah.
How would you define the difference between integrating different cultural aspects, whether it's food or music or clothing? How do you differentiate that between that and cultural appropriation?
That is so interesting, because I remember years and years ago, a friend of mine gave me a Chinese dress, beautiful dress, that's built on one particular culture in China, and I wore it. Nobody would ever mistake me for a Chinese person. But I did not wear it saying that this is my culture and this is how I no. I did it as a mark, again, going back to respect. And I think that's the thing with integrating as opposed to cultural appropriation. If you are doing something and you're doing it with respect and you're doing it out of kind of homage to that culture, I don't think you're appropriating it. I wasn't trying to say that this is me, this is part of who I am, but I'm saying that this is beautiful and this is how I choose to show that I think it is beautiful.
Mm.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And I think we show up in a space of having grace and giving and being patient with people to clarify and to speak, of wanting to respect different cultures rather than a space of assuming, that we know the intention of others. Is we have to hold space for understanding where they're coming from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sometimes we're so quick to say, to attribute that this person does this out of spite or malice. But no, we have to wait and look at the person. I've worn saris when I'm conducting. I've worn also, well, I have in me Indian, African, a little bit of Chinese, everything, even Jewish. I mean, within this body,
Yes. Right.
European, and you cannot tell looking at someone. And that is sometimes what we as people do. We look at somebody, how they look on the outside, and we assume, as you said, we assume that we know who they are.
Right.
But
Right.
we don't,
Yeah.
we can't.
There's no
Mm.
way. Well, I'm very curious. I have a question for you, and it's something that we've talked about on the Ego Project before. Your position of coaching. I think it's really cool that you have, the experience as a musician, you have the experience as an educator, which are in, space where you're, entertaining and teaching and informing and kind of, just giving, right? And then coaching where you're really attuning into your clients and they're coming to you from a creative space, right? Where they're creating and needing your guidance, but you're meeting them in almost a more intimate space, what they really need you to tune into them for in that helping space. So what have you kind of come across? We've talked about, the creative industry and the ego work that kind of occurs there. What do you see in your coaching practice that people really grapple with when it comes to ego work and putting themselves out there creatively?
What I find is that within most of us, even the person who seems the most brash and unsure of themselves, there's a core of uncertainty.
Mhm.
And just understanding where that uncertainty comes from. And sometimes it goes all the way back to childhood, that again, the ego, that person who said, "Oh, you'll never be good at that." And yeah, even though you've shown that you're an expert, that you are the one who can do that, still there's that voice saying, no, you can't do this. You are an imposter. And so getting down to that inner voice, that inner voice that is dragging you down, and within and being able to tell that voice, no, you're wrong.
Mhm.
I can do this. And with some of the people that I coach, some of them are moving from the traditionally creative industry into other industries and showing how you can use your creativity in the so-called normal world.
Right. That's why
Because
they need the creativity, right? Because they're too normal.
yes, especially in this time when we don't
Yeah.
know what the next 20 years is going to bring.
Absolutely. Very cool. I love that. Yeah.
With being a musician and with steel pan drum, which is a very patriarchal, male dominated musical instrument. Am I accurate about that? That's
It
my
has been for since its inception. Of course, there were always women around and as part of the scene. It's changing and has been changing women are taking, as with every every sector of the industries
Yes.
around the world, women are sharing and really making their mark. So it is changing. But traditionally, especially when I was coming up, it was definitely male dominated.
Wow. What ego work have you done around being in that environment?
Being sure of yourself, you know, at least portraying that you're really sure of yourself, because as
Oh, yeah.
I've told the story many times where at one time there was a competition and the manager of a band came to me and he saw me and he said, at that time I was much smaller, much younger, you know, he said, They'll never listen to me. You, those men will never listen to you. You're too young. He thought I was male because of my name, but he said they'll never listen to you. And then another manager came and he said, "Oh, come and work with us." I said, "Are you sure? I'm female. This is me." He said, "Yeah, come." And I again, that respect. I went and I worked with 100 men in the band, and I respected them. They respected me, and we were able to do so much. You
Mhm.
know? So standing and being strong and sure of yourself and not allowing people to browbeat you into believing you are less than you are.
Right.
And I think that's important. And again, it goes back to that foundation, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. And for some people who maybe didn't get that foundation in childhood from their family of origin, finding that foundation is part of
That's where, sorry, that's where your community comes in to find who you want to be. Find people, independent thinking people, people who will shore you up. Do not, once you get around somebody and somebody starts pulling you down, that's your cue to leave. That's your cue to say, okay, it's been nice. I've got something on the stove in my house 4 miles away.
Yes.
No one can argue there's something on the stove, right?
There you go. So you extricated yourself quite nicely from whatever's going on there, that negative energy that is pulling you down.
Yes.
No, you go and turn off your stove, even if
Yeah.
it's a stove that you've not yet purchased,
Correct. Nicely and quickly.
right?
No,
Absolutely.
thank you for saying that because I think so often the ego wounding occurs where we feel like we have to defend ourselves in an environment that's being disrespectful. We have to convince them of our worth.
Mhm.
And I love that. And then we get, the idea that, well, you ran away or, you are avoidant or, and some of that may be true. But in reality, anytime you choose respect for yourself over appeasing another,
Mhm.
that's healing.
Yeah.
That you're going in the right direction. So thank you. I think especially as females in our culture, we're taught to make nice,
Mhm.
to soothe things over, to not push back, and all of these things, and to just stay and take it. So thank you for saying that. I think that's such a good reminder. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's important because imagine in situations like that, imagine if you were in the sea and you were drowning, you
Mhm.
know, and by some good grace you make it to the shore. Are you going to go back because the sea is telling you you ran away? No, 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 no. Thank you very much. No, I'm not
That
drowning
is
anymore. I
that is a
will
very
have
good
you.
Yeah.
analogy. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to remember that next time. The stove thing and the
And
sea.
I say no to drowning again.
Yeah,
Say
I'm
no to
moving
the
away.
sea.
I'm staying on shore if I make it. Yeah, that's good.
That is the catchphrase. Say no to drowning. Anytime you're in a negative space, say no to drowning.
There you go.
I
I like it.
can argue with that, right?
Well, let me ask you this. So, as an educator, and someone who is, had a lot of cultural experiences and diverse cultural experiences and work around that, what advice would you give someone who, when it comes to ego work healing, recognizing wounding and cultural identity? What kind of advice would you offer someone?
I think, first of all, you have to know who you are and who you want to be, because sometimes they're not the same thing, because many of us have been wounded, and who we are right now is not the person we want to be. So first of all, decide and look at yourself and say, is this what I want? Am I who I want to be? And then once you've made that you've looked at both of those things or all of those things, then depending on the answer to that first question, you continue to develop. If you are who you want to be, then you work on that. You find things that will develop that person. If you aren't who you want to be, then you find the people that will help you, or the books, or the pieces of music, or the art, or whatever it is that will help you get to that point. So you define, you develop, and you do it. You do it. Don't allow people to pull you down. Don't allow people to make you feel less than you are.
I love that you added find the art that helps you be who you want to be. That's something we haven't heard on here, and I think that is such a beautiful statement as a reminder that art can speak to you and be a reminder and touch you in a way that you don't have to do anything for it. It just touches you because it's supposed to.
Yes. I remember years ago when my daughter was a toddler, and I was playing a piece of music that was written by a friend of mine, and she said, "Oh, it was an instrumental piece," and she said, "Oh, mommy, turn that off, turn that off." So I turned it off. I said, "Why? What happened?" She said, "Oh, that makes me feel so sad." And I said, "Oh my goodness, at one, you already you're reacting to that art, that music, what is around you, and you realize that sometimes it can be too much, and sometimes it can be just enough. We're all Goldilocks,
That's so we're very temperamental.
Yes, we are. And I love what you, Dawn and Christine, just said about what's right for one person may not be right for another, but there's something for everyone. You just have to seek it. And I had there was the flavor of your auntie talking to you about either you're going to quit or you're going to push through in what you said, Dawn, because sometimes we're on a path and we just keep pushing through on that path, and it's not taking us where we want to go, but we think that's who we are and who we're supposed to be. And taking the stillness, being able to step back, go, okay, is this where I want to be, who I want to be? Am I showing up in spaces that embrace me, that help me grow, or am I showing up in spaces that make me feel less than? And I so love that, and it just hit me right in my feels, when you said that, Dawn. So thank you for that. That was beautiful advice to anyone, and someone can listen to that, just that little snippet, and go, okay, I get it. I can start now. So yeah, thank you for giving people that permission.
Well, especially in Dawn's voice. I'm just going to listen to this over and over again and just be soothed by Dr. B's voice, which is, I'm sure, how her students have felt in her seminars. So yes.
Oh, thank you. I think one of the things, and you spoke about silence, that's another thing I've always told my students, because the Japanese have the concept of ma, where silence is a very important part of the whole. And sometimes, especially as musicians, we think that, when we want to improvise, we have to keep going and notes and notes and notes and notes. But silence, that time when you take for yourself, is equally as important as the sound around you. So yeah, you have to leave room for that silence.
What is the silence called in a composition?
Rests, you can use it as rest. And I think that's a good word
Mm-hmm.
because we rest. We need to rest.
Oh, for sure.
Sometimes when we are so caught up in the up and down of the world, we forget that rest is important. Those 8 hours of sleep or however many, we think we can get by with one or two, but we're wrong because our brain needs it, our body needs it, our soul. We need that rest. We need that silence.
Mhm. So true. Yeah.
That's so good. Thank you. Is there anything else you would like to add? Do you have any questions for us, Dawn?
I would just like to thank you both, because it is so important to be able to share with people, as you do, the importance of the ego, the importance of everything that comes into who we are. And so thank you for doing this.
Thank you. Thank you for being a part of that, of the story we tell.
It's so good. And, I just absolutely love everything that you're saying and everything that you're doing. So we will put the links for checking in with Dr. B in our description box. And we are going to put the link to Dr. B's website. And you can join her forum, which is full of educators and musicians. And they even sometimes have jam sessions.
Oh,
I think that's important to remember, because it's not just, showing up. You get to show up and have some fun with music as well. Dr. B, as always, we would love to have you back in the future. If there's ever anything you want to share with us, just reach out. We would love to have you back. Make sure to like the video, everyone, please. Share it and subscribe. Cristine, do you have anything to add?
no, I'm so looking forward to having you back. I'm already swirling some ideas around talking points. So I'm have really enjoyed the conversation for sure.
I have as well. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, Dr. B. Thank you, Cristine. We will see you next time.
All right.